In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
Joe had huge problems with the IRS.
I knew it was coming. I hadn't filed taxes since 1990.
All the IRS letters coming in added up to a nightmare.
To get up to like $68,000. My heart started beating fast. It's like, there's no way, man. I mean, I ain't going to be able to do this.
Then they stopped his paycheck.
So that's when I started making phone calls and down U.S. Tax Shield.
U.S. Tax Shield went to work immediately.
They just took the bull by the horns. What blew my mind is he called the IRS right then and there.
So why is U.S. Tax Shield A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau? Joe knows.
They saved me a ridiculous amount of money.
If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or state, choose the company Joe chose, U.S. Tax Shield.
It was the best decision I made. U.S. Tax Shield is the way to go. Life is good. Thank you, Lord.
Call 800-471-3287.
U.S. Tax Shield. Boo-rah. Yes.
800-471-3287. 800-471-3287.
This is JD.
And this is Stacy.
Join us Tuesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern for Game On. Remember,
lock up the children and the old folks.
Game On, the home of conservative conservatism.
Where no one is safe, no one is spared, not even the hosts.
Oh, that was supposed to be a spin cycle. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We love you anyway. Right round, baby.
Self-monitoring
right
Ebola
anyway.
radio strikes again.
Anyway.
Anybody see the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? For God's sake, I need an antidote. Just do your rant. Let's pop out of the segment.
Has to do with
Find us on Twitter at JD and Stacy.
You're listening to K98Talk.com. The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rails. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
This group of tyrants wants to disarm us. They want to deny you and me our freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Keep your hands off our guns, damn it. My fellow patriots, I've had it, and I'm tired of seeing the Second Amendment treated like the bastard child of the Bill of Rights. All of you have to know that defending freedom is going to be a fight that has no end. And if you're going to stand with me, you can't be afraid to get your knuckles bloody. If you're going to stand with me, you have to be willing to resist any attempt by government to disarm law-abiding people by fighting with the ferociousness of a junkyard dog. Thank you. God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
And we're back, and you might hear a little bit of an audio difference because we had to switch platforms. Have a little bit of trouble with Spreaker again, which seems to be a common problem. Maybe we'll figure that out later. A little bit right here, and so thanks for joining us. We're going to hear a little bit more from our friend Mr. Gowdy. He's going to explain to us just exactly why we have this Benghazi committee, because there's a lot of rumors out there, of course, about why it may be being done, and, you know, is it a political ploy or this, that, and the other thing, but you know, it's been going on for quite a while. We might have some other audio from him to explain that as well. So let's just get into this first clip and have Mr. Gowdy explain to us why we're actually having this committee and these hearings now.
Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods served this country with courage and with honor. And they were killed under circumstances that most of us could never imagine. Terrorists pour through the front gate of an American facility, attacking people and property with machine guns, mortars, and fire. It is important that we remember how these four men died. It is equally important that we remember how these four men lived and why. They were more than four images on a television screen. They were husbands and fathers and sons and brothers and family and friends. They were Americans who believed in service and sacrifice. Many people speak wistfully of a better world, but do little about it. These four went out and actually tried to make it better, and it cost them their lives. We know what they gave us. What do we owe them? Justice for those that killed them. We owe their families our everlasting gratitude, respect. We owe them and each other the truth about why we were in Libya. The truth about what we were doing in Libya. The truth about the escalating violence in Libya before we were attacked and these four men were killed. The truth about requests for additional security. The truth about requests for additional personnel. The truth about requests for additional equipment. The truth about where and why our military was positioned as it was on the anniversary of 9/11. The truth about what was happening and being discussed in Washington while our people were under attack. The truth about what led to the attacks, and the truth about what our government told the American people after the attacks. Why were there so many requests for more security personnel and equipment, and why were those requests denied in Washington?
Unanswered questions. Very easily answered questions that remain unanswered. So, why? Why do, after all this time, these questions remain unanswered? Well, we're going to get into a little bit of a smackdown from Gowdy in a little bit. We've got two Gowdy smackdowns, which were, you know, quite honestly, the best part of the hearings today. And he delivered them both in the morning, and I did not hear him deliver one in the afternoon. And I don't know, you know, if behind the scenes he had a little discussion with the guys and told him to cut it out. You know, it didn't really sound like it. But it was the obvious, you know, defense versus offense, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the typical what you hear in a hearing, especially those that are televised, I'm sure the depositions and the questioning that go on behind closed doors don't have nearly as much drama. And we're going to, get into a couple of those Smackdowns that were really good. He seems to, from my perspective, and I realize that not everybody has my perspective, but he seems to be very intolerant of the political games that are played, and I think you'll hear that a little bit. He wants to be really clear about the law versus what's going on here, and getting to the answers and getting to the truth. And I think he explained that very well in the last clip. He wants to get to the truth. He thinks the families and the American people deserve to have the truth. And he's hit nothing but wall after wall after wall after wall with this administration, as often happens in many administrations throughout history. Doesn't make it right. It makes it that much more wrong, in my opinion, that forever we've had people like Gowdy railing against the system. Forever later, the system remains the same. So let's hear one of Gowdy's Smackdowns before it starts getting too late.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Gentleman from California yields back. I'm going to address a couple of things that he said and then recognize myself. Because he invoked the family members of the four, Madam Secretary, and partially this will be for your benefit also, but I want to specifically address the family members that are here. There is no theory of the prosecution, Mr. Schiff, because there is no prosecution. There's a very big difference between a prosecution where you already have reached a conclusion and you're just trying to prove it to people. This is an investigation, which is why it's so sad that nowhere in that stack that you just put up there, where the emails of Secretary Clinton, the emails of the ambassador, 50,000 pages worth of documents, eyewitnesses, that's the real tragedy. To the family and the friends, when you're told that there have been 7 previous investigations in an ARB, you should immediately ask, why did you miss so many witnesses? Why did you miss so many documents? This is not a prosecution, Mr. Schiff. You and I are both familiar with them. I've reached no conclusions, and I would advise you to not reach any conclusions either until we reach the end. There are 20 more witnesses. So I'll agree not to reach any conclusions if you'll do the same. With that, Madam Secretary, regardless of where he ranked in the order of advisors, it is undisputed that a significant number of your emails were to or from a Sidney Blumenthal. Now, he did not work for the State Department. He didn't work for the U.S. government at all.
Okay, before we go on, there's a little bit of a disagreement there about the importance of the Sidney Blumenthal's emails, and we're going to get into some of the clips that preceded it actually a little bit later. But how important were those emails to Blumenthal, and the volume of those emails, and what role did he play versus other advisors in the White House or in the State Department? He certainly wasn't in the White House. The White House didn't want to have anything to do with him, which is why he didn't have a job at the State Department with the appropriate clearance to begin with. So the whole thing is a little bit odd, but you throw in Mr. Blumenthal and it starts to get downright sketchy. So let's let Mr. Gowdy and Miss Clinton go on just a little bit.
He wanted to work for the State Department, but the White House said no to him. Do you recall who specifically at the White House rejected Sidney Blumenthal?
No, I do not.
After he was turned down for a job at the State Department by the White House, he went to work where?
I think he had a number of consulting contracts with different entities.
Well, if he had a number of them, do you recall any of them?
I know that he did some work for my husband.
Well, he worked for the Clinton Foundation.
That's correct.
Okay. He worked for Media Matters.
I'm sure he did.
He worked for Correct the Record.
I'm sure he did.
When you were asked about Sidney Blumenthal, you said he was an old friend who sent you unsolicited emails, which you passed on in some instances because you wanted to hear from people outside what you called the bubble. We will ignore for a second whether or not Sidney Blumenthal is outside the bubble, but I do want to ask you about a couple of those other comments, because what you left out was that he was an old friend who knew absolutely nothing about Libya, was critical of President Obama and others that you work with, loved to send you political and image advice, had business interests in Libya, which he not only alerted you to, but solicited your help for. And you often forwarded his emails, but usually only after you redacted out any identifiers so nobody knew where the information was coming from. What does the word unsolicited mean to you?
So I'm not even sure that her answer is important at this point, but I can tell you that it was a circular solicitation. And when were they solicited? Were they initially solicited? Or they weren't initially solicited, but maybe they were encouraged after the fact. Well, who really knows? And I don't think anybody ever really will know. That's the funny thing about the Clintons, the way they do business and their friends. Mr. Blumenthal was, interestingly enough, a very close advisor to the Clintons, especially to Hillary Clinton throughout the years. And when it came time for Hillary to be Secretary of State, everyone would have really loved it. Mr. Blumenthal, Mrs. Clinton would have really loved him being in the State Department and actually having a job there. But some of his activities during the campaign, to my understanding, when there was a primary between Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Obama, some of Mr. Blumenthal's activities were highly questionable and not someone that the Obama administration trusted. So, even in her own party, even within her own administration, even when it came to the man that she worked for, she did, well, she works for us. We haven't forgotten that. But even for the President of the United States, she hid her real activity. She wasn't honest about who she was talking to or what she was doing. And this is a woman that we would even consider, and that some people actually support, to be the President of the United States. And not just some people. There are actually a lot of people, depending on what poll you look at. And I'm of the mind that polls at this point in the game are really pretty much just paychecks for pollsters, unless they dig into real attitudes and feelings. And I know there are some great pollsters out there doing that, so kudos to you guys. Real deep data. But the high level, who do you support kind of stuff, that's really not very valid at this point. But nonetheless, there are people out there who support this woman and defend her and what she's done and the lies that she's told. And I should have pulled the "what difference does it make" clips, because remember, she told us years ago at this point that it really didn't make any difference why the tragedy in Benghazi happened. In the time of terror, the time of terrorists, that the reason for the attack on the consulate was not important. Now stop and let that sink in for a minute. Just think about that. The reason doesn't matter. If it was terrorism, no matter. If it was just some guys out for a walk one night, who cares? It really doesn't matter. It definitely matters. It matters so much that I feel like listening to another Trey Gowdy Smackdown. So let's hear Smackdown number 2 from Mr. Gowdy.
But it was certainly not in any way the primary source of or the predominant understanding that we had of what was going on in Libya and what we needed to be doing.
Well, Madam Secretary, I'm out of time, and we'll pick this back up the next round, but I'll go ahead and let you know ahead of time why it's relevant. It's relevant because our ambassador was asked to read and respond to Sidney Blumenthal's drivel. It was sent to him to read and react to. In some instances, on the very same day he was asking for security. So I think it is eminently fair to ask why Sidney Blumenthal had unfettered access to you, Madam Secretary, with whatever he wanted to talk about, and there's not a single solitary email to or from you to or from Ambassador Stevens. I think that is fair, and we'll take that up next round.
And I think it's fair. I think it's extremely fair. Why would you not ask the Secretary of State, after a tragedy like that one, why were you spending all of your time taking advice from this person who doesn't work for the State Department and who you were asked to not communicate with, who has business interests in Libya? Why is it not valid to ask, why did you spend so much time with him and not almost no time with the ambassador there in Libya just prior to this attack? So they got into a lot of all the requests that came in. And one of our favorite Congressman Pompeo, who we will hear from shortly, he's from Kansas, and he did a great job today. He's actually our next one up, because we've got the heroes first, and we're going to hear the tyrants in the end. So the question is, you know, all of these requests early on for assistance from the Benghazi consulate, from the CIA, from the ambassador himself, for increased security, and they ramped up in the weeks and months before the attack. And the actual requests that were met, the security that was provided, the yes answers that they got, were minuscule by comparison. Pompeo had a chart. Of course, everything is done in charts these days, but visuals are good, and I think it was really helpful for the audience, and it'll never make it onto the mainstream media. Go to C-SPAN and watch the video. I'm just providing clips. So we're going to hear a little bit about poor Hillary and how hard she works. And, oh no, we're not. We're going to hear Jim Jordan sum it up. He's going to sum the whole chronology up for us in a couple of quick sound bites. And this might be the shortest clip of the night. So
they were doing at night. Is that correct? They were doing at night. Is that correct?
We had a plane bringing additional security. And also the Defense Department was doing everything it could possibly do. We had a plane bringing additional security from Tripoli to Benghazi. There was an enormous amount of activity. Everyone was.
All right, so we're going to hear Congressman Pompeo talk about that a little bit now, and really put the challenges to the Secretary of State.
Is that they missed something here, and we lost 4 Americans.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo.
Madam Secretary, you've referred to the QDDR a couple times as being important to diplomatic security. Is that correct?
It provoked a discussion, Congressman, about balancing of risk.
Madam Secretary, I had a chance to read that. I wanted to only read the executive summary that ran 25 pages, but it didn't have a word about diplomatic security in those entire 25 pages of the executive summary. Not one word, Madam Secretary. And then I read the remaining pages, amounted to 270 plus. You know how many pages of those 270 had to do with diplomatic security?
It was about the balancing of risk and reward, which was not only about diplomatic security specifically, but about the larger question of our mission around the world.
Madam Secretary, there was no balance. There was 2 pages out of 270 pages. You talked about a lot of things in there. You talked about a lot of improvements. They didn't have anything to do with diplomatic security in any material way in that report. You talked about being disciplined.
Okay, so the QDR is the Quadrennial Defense Review. And Hillary believes she just stated it was about goals and achievements. And the name should speak for itself. The Quadrennial Defense Review. It's supposed to be a review of risk assessments from the DoD and security agencies that is presented and provided in an unclassified way, so that the American people in government, people without security classifications, can read this and understand it. Why she's invoking it in this hearing, I will never know. I will attest to the fact that it has, over the years, become a touchy-feely USAID kind of document. It began as exactly what it sounds like. I can remember about 1999. It was still a pretty good defense document. You know, you could tell it was done by the State Department and not by the CA or one of those agencies, but it was meant to be a declassified document, something for the general public. And the language in it sometimes, you know, exceeds the 8th grade level. It certainly it exceeds that level. It can be a complicated read, but if you have a general idea of national security, you can definitely get through it and understand what's going on. It's where, when I in school, you know, I would quote it in my papers, but I certainly didn't base my thesis on it. So why she's even invoking it in this hearing, I'll never know. But it's interesting that they're having a discussion about it, because it is the declassified document for defense intelligence and for defense review in the country. But it's also began as a defense review. It should be a defense review, but it's become, obviously, a very touchy-feely kind of thing, where 20 years ago, it certainly would have addressed security at embassies and an overall terror threat, particularly the one that we're looking at now. And obviously, according to Congressman Pompeo, they did not do this in this QDR. It's a fascinating thing to me. I think that it not only shows that Hillary dropped the ball in this one instance, but that the administration is dropping the ball overall. If you can't publish a good QDR, then, you know, what are you doing in office? And definitely, what are you doing in office for 8 years? So let's listen to the congressman from Kansas a little more.
Pointed to, I've heard you use that several times. You were disappointed. You read the ARB. Why don't you fire someone? In Kansas, Madam Secretary, I get asked constantly, why has no one been held accountable? How come not a single person lost a single paycheck connected to the fact that we had the first ambassador killed since 1979? How come no one has been held accountable to date?
Well, Congressman, the Accountability Review Board pointed out several people working in the State Department who they thought had not carried out their responsibilities adequately, but they said that they could not find a breach of duty. And
yes, ma'am,
the personnel rules and the laws that govern those decisions were followed very carefully.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not asking what the ARB did. I'm asking what you did.
I followed the law, Congressman.
So
that was my responsibility.
Madam Secretary, you're telling me that you had no authority to take anyone's paycheck, to cause anyone to be fired. You're telling me you were legally prohibited from doing that. Is that your position here this morning?
It is my position that in the absence of finding dereliction or breach of duty, there could not be immediate action taken, but there was a process that was immediately instituted and which led to decisions being made.
Yes, ma'am. The decision was to put these back at full back pay and keep them on as employees. That was the decision that was made as a result of the processes that you put in place. I will tell you, the folks in Kansas don't think that is accountability. I want to do some math with.
Oh, snap. So the congressman from Kansas kind of let her know what all of us in red states feel like. If someone is accountable for this, someone needs to be held accountable for this. And if that doesn't happen, there is no leadership in Washington anymore. We certainly, you know, watching this hearing, and we're going to go into the clips from Democrats after the break, but watching the back and forth on this and knowing that there were so many excuses made on the left. There were so many. They blamed it on everything from, you know, budget cuts to sequester to any number of things that did not even occur before this event. It's the Republicans in Congress' fault, basically, was the line of the day. Or they were talking about the sadness on the part of the secretary with regards to the death of her friend. That is the only thing I've ever been able to sympathize with Hillary Clinton. I understand that this was someone that she knew, and if she says she considered him a friend, then who am I to say any differently? However, you'd think that she'd show a little bit more concern for actually bringing his killers to justice, because that has not been done. And I think that's something that we all need to keep in mind as we go into this next break with our audio problems. I'm going to play a nice song for you rather than our usual break. But as we do that, as we go into this break, let's think a little bit about why she's not more adamant to protect her friend's memory, to find his killers and bring them to justice. I don't understand that. That's the one thing I don't understand in this whole thing, probably more than anything. I get politics. I get wanting to cover your... What I don't get is not wanting to find your friend's killer. And I probably never will. So we'll be back after this nice song from Tennessee Jed.
Seeds I've sown. I'm headed down to New Orleans where the Mississippi flows. I'm pulling out my pruning shears, gonna lighten up my load. I did my time in Georgia, got the best of me. Then Jerry and the boys on set head back to Tennessee. Now I bundled up my baggage, leave it in the dust. Them Nashville cats won't slow me down, I'm shaking off my rust. I'm pulling out my pruning shears before I hit the road. I'm trimming back the old growth, the better seeds I've sowed. I'm headed down to New Orleans where the Mississippi flows. I'm pulling out my pruning shears, gonna lighten up my load.
Alright, that was my good friend Jed and his little act he calls Tennessee Jed. You can find him in just about anywhere. He's got a couple of albums. I've helped him with a little bit of art, and he's a really good friend of mine. So check out Tennessee Jed, who lets me play his music on my show, and I love him for it. Thanks, Jed. So we are back, and we're listening to clips from the hearing today. We heard a little bit from the congressman from Kansas, Pompeo, and I think that we'll start. I don't want it to all be evil villains in the second half. So we're going to start it off with Pompeo, and hopefully, it'll make up for some of the stuff that we're going to hear in this part of the show.
Could I get the first chart, please? You know how many security requests there were in the first quarter of 2012?
For everyone or for Benghazi?
I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. Related to Benghazi and Libya. Do you know how many there were?
No, I do not know.
Ma'am, there were just over 100 plus. In the second quarter, do you know how many there were?
No, I do not.
Ma'am, there were 172-ish. That'd have been 171 or 173. That's how many were there in July and August, and then in that week and a few days before the attacks? Do you know?
There were a number of them. I know that.
Yes, ma'am. 83 by our count. It's over 600 requests. You've testified here this morning that you had none of those reach your desk. Is that correct also?
That's correct.
Madam Secretary, Mr. Blumenthal wrote you 150 emails. It appears from the testimony or the materials that we've read that all of those reached your desk. Can you tell us why security requests from your professionals, the men that you just testified, and with which I agree are incredibly professional, incredibly capable people, trained in the art of keeping us all safe, none of those made it to you? The man who was a friend of yours, who'd never been to Libya, didn't know much about it, at least that's his testimony, didn't know much about it. Every one of those reports he sent on to you that had to do with situations on the ground in Libya, those made it to your desk. You asked for more of them, you read them, you corresponded with him, and yet the folks that worked for you didn't have the same courtesy.
Well, Congressman, as you're aware, he's a friend of mine. He sent me information he thought might be of interest. Some of it was, some of it wasn't. Some of it I forwarded to be followed up on. The professionals and experts who reviewed it found some of it useful, some of it not. He had no official position in the government, and he was not at all my advisor on Libya. He was a friend who sent me information that he thought might be in some way helpful.
Madam Secretary, I have lots of friends. They send me things. I've never had somebody send me a couple of pieces of intelligence with the level of detail that Mr. Blumenthal sent me every week. That's a special friend.
Well, it was information that had been shared with him that he forwarded on. And as someone who got the vast majority of the information that I acted on from official channels, I read a lot of articles that brought new ideas to my attention, and occasionally people in
Oh, it was just information sent by a friend, and, I forwarded it on and didn't think about it that much, even though I did think about it long enough to stop and take information out of it that I didn't really necessarily want to share. So, the political stuff that I didn't want my peers and my colleagues at the State Department to necessarily see, and, if there was anything in there that I didn't want the president to see, and, might make its way back to him, or, better take Sydney's name off of here, because if they know this is coming from Sydney, it would probably be bad. So that kind of behavior, if you saw it in the office, would you think it was okay? Or would you think that maybe my coworker might be up to something over there because they're, they're taking things out of emails? I can tell that, they're forwarding me things that I can't see where they're coming from, and, what's going on. She does this all the time. I would stop and think about it. It's just like those people on Twitter that are always deleting their tweets. And you think, why does this person delete so many tweets? Well, it's probably because they're up to something. I'm not sure I've ever deleted a tweet, but I can tell you if I did, it was because there was a stupid typo in it. And that's why I hate autocorrect. But if I deleted a tweet, you can bet that it's because it was a typo. And if not, I'll tell you, I found out I was wrong. Disregard that previous tweet. It was false information. So it's kind of like that. So I'm going to take this out of this email, just like somebody's going to delete their tweets because they're up to no good. We are going to move on from the white hats to the not so white hats. And unfortunately, we didn't have the Jim Jordan sum up because something went wrong with that audio. But we do have a couple of setups from Congressman Sanchez, who obviously is Hillary's biggest fan, and I wish I had that JD soundbite, or sound clip right there. She is, for sure, Hillary's Clinton's biggest fan, and nobody provided cover for Hillary quite like Sanchez did today. And she did it in a way to make sure that she vilified her colleagues on the other side of the aisle as much as possible. And other than the meltdown by Cummings, which I will not play on this show because I refuse to play that kind of drama. Came right after the clip that I played of Gowdy earlier, and it was just a complete meltdown, and it was for no other reason than drama. So I refuse to play that clip. I'm not putting Elijah on my show, maybe ever, but I'm definitely not going to play the meltdown clip, because while it was hilarious, and I was probably rolling on the floor laughing, I'm not going to play it on my show because it doesn't deserve any airtime, because it was nothing but drama. There was no truth to it, and even Trey Gowdy ceased to attempt to respond to it after a while. So, but let's hear Sanchez providing cover for Hillary. It's really entertaining.
We know that over the last 17 months there have been a number of allegations that have been made with respect to you, and when the facts and the testimony and the record don't support that, we seem to move on to the next new allegation. One of the more recent ones is that Republicans are claiming that because you received emails from Sidney Blumenthal, that he was your primary source for intelligence. Now, Chairman Gowdy claimed that Mr. Blumenthal was, and I'm going to quote him here, quote, Secretary Clinton's primary advisor on Libya, because nearly half of all the emails sent to and from Secretary Clinton regarding Benghazi and Libya prior to the Benghazi terrorist attacks involved Sidney Blumenthal, end quote. He also claimed that Mr. Blumenthal was, and I'm quoting again, one of the folks providing her the largest volume of information about Libya. Secretary Clinton, was Sidney Blumenthal your primary policy advisor or your primary intelligence officer?
And, yeah, so before I ask this question about what Mr. Blumenthal was to you, let me make sure that I set it up very clearly that he was, before you answer the question, let me make sure that I make a big deal out of what everyone else has said about it and all of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are saying about it, and let me make sure that I set up for everyone, before I ask you the question, what my beliefs are about it, what I believe to be true. Let me make sure that I set the stage for people and tell them what they're supposed to think, because we know that they don't know. And if we tell them how they're supposed to feel about it and what they're supposed to think about whether it's true or not, they'll believe us, because they're them and we're us, and that's how we always operate. And that wasn't the only time that she did it, and neither is this. There was more than two, but let's listen to her do it one more time.
So it seems to me, there have been allegations that the work that this committee has done has been political in nature, and that much of the facts have already been decided before all of the evidence is in, including your testimony here today. When I see clips like that, it sort of supports the theory that this panel is not really interested in investigating what happened just prior to, the evening of, and immediately in the aftermath of September 11th, 2012, but that in fact there is another motive behind that. We have you here, and so while you are here, I want to make the most of your time and allow you to sort of debunk many of the myths that have been generated over the last 17 months, most of which have no factual basis for those being said. One is that you seemingly were disengaged the evening of September 11th, 2012. For example, Mike Huckabee accused you, as Mr. Cummings said, of ignoring the warning calls from dying Americans in Benghazi, and Senator Rand Paul stated that Benghazi was a 3 a.m. phone call that you never picked up. And Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted, "Where the hell were you on the night of the Benghazi attack?" Those appear to be based on the testimony of witnesses and the documentation that we have obtained in this committee and other previous committees. They seem to run counter to the truth, because the testimony we've received states pretty much that you were deeply engaged the night of the attack. So can you describe for us what the initial hours of that night were like for you, and how you learned about the attacks, and what your initial thoughts and actions were?
So let's debunk the myths. Wow, myths. Thank you, Congressman Sanchez, for letting us know that everything that we've heard about Hillary up until this point is a myth. Everything that we've heard about Benghazi is a myth. Well, okay, in fairness, she didn't say that it was all a myth, but she created this perception for anyone that was watching that part of the hearing that there are all these myths around Benghazi. Sure, there's probably a myth or two. That's what happens when you hide the truth. When you hide the truth from the American people, Obama administration, you give everyone the opportunity to create whatever myth they want to. Sure, maybe the American public would do that anyway. Who knows? We'll never know. I do remember, and we're not that different than we were 20 or 30 years ago. And if we are, blame the millennials, because I was alive then, and I remember. And when Reagan had a situation like that, 9 times out of 10, he would come right out and explain the situation. And he would even tell people who worked for him, testify. Tell the truth. And how often did we really create a lot of myths around Reagan? Well, Iran-Contra, that was their one real mistake when it came to messaging. They probably didn't say as much as quickly as they should have about Iran-Contra, and it became the myth around the Reagan administration. That is the big story. So you know what, Hillary Clinton? If there are myths running around about Benghazi, it is nobody's fault but your own, and nobody's fault but the Obama administration. It was a political cycle, it was a presidential campaign, and we all know why you hit it. So, saying that, we're going to get into being a little bit nicer to Miss Clinton. Nah, you guys know better than that. But we are going to hear a little bit about how hard she works and talk about why this was a big fat oops for Hillary.
I got intelligence briefings from the intelligence community. I had a very experienced group of senior diplomats who knew quite a bit about Libya. Deputy Secretary Bill Burns had been our nation's top diplomat who actually had negotiated with Gaddafi prior to the entering in by the United States to support our European allies and Arab partners. I sent a team to meet with representatives of Gaddafi to see if there were some way that he would back down and back off of his increasingly hysterical threats against his own people. We had people like the ambassador that I referenced earlier who had served in Libya and had the occasion to observe and meet with Gaddafi. So we had a very large group of American diplomats, intelligence officers, and some private citizens who were experts in Libya who were available to our government. And we took advantage of every person we could with expertise to guide our decision making.
Wow. All of that work, and they didn't know any better than to send more security to Benghazi, where they had a facility, and the CIA had a facility. They didn't know any better. All that work, all that hard work, they were connected to everyone, to Gaddafi, but they didn't know any better.
So would it be fair to say that you received information from Ambassador Stevens?
Yes.
The Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs?
Yes.
The Director of Policy Planning, Jacob Sullivan?
Yes.
The National Security Council?
Yes.
The Intelligence Community?
Yes.
The Defense Department?
Yes.
And all of those people are complicit in this massive failure, not just of policy, but of execution. They were told. And she just said right there that she spoke with Ambassador Stevens. The testimony in the hearing was that Ambassador Stevens asked over and over and over again for assistance, for more security, for more help. And that was an admission that there had been communication, that she had spoken with him. But then earlier in the hearing, they said that none of his requests for assistance got through to her. Well, now, how does that happen? How do you speak with someone about a situation, about this overall security of Libya, yet you never heard from them that there were additional security needs at the consulate, or at the embassy, or at both, or for the ambassador? The request for help for additional security never got through to Hillary Clinton, but Hillary Clinton just admitted, or just claimed, that the ambassador was one of the people that she spoke with, that she talked to, that she got her information on Libya from, in defending herself from, the whole Blumenthal thing. I'm really confused. And again, it's like that Twitter thing where they can't keep their lies straight. So many sock accounts, I can't tell which one I'm in. It really is crazy. And I guess maybe when you live by the Alinsky rules of communication, whether you apply them to being the Secretary of State and speaking with Congress and the American people, or if you apply them to, debating with people on Twitter, or if you apply them to your workplace. If you abide by those Alinsky rules, that's what you run into. You can't keep your lies straight. You can hardly even remember who you are at the moment because you play so many roles, victim being one of the main ones. So it's Alinsky for the 21st century. Isn't this a wonderful thing? Man, if he knew that he was living on this way, I'm sure he'd be happy. So let's listen to a little bit of Hillary Works Hard Part 2.
Well, Congresswoman, I learned about the attacks from a State Department official rushing into my office shortly after or around 4 o'clock to tell me that our compound in Benghazi had been attacked. We immediately summoned all of the top officials in the State Department for them to begin reaching out. The most important quick call was to try to reach Chris himself. That was not possible. Then to have the diplomatic security people try to reach their agents, that was not possible. They were obviously defending themselves along with the ambassador and Sean Smith. We reached the second in command in Tripoli. He had heard shortly before we reached him from Chris Stevens telling him that they were under attack.
Wow, man, she was really busy that night. Still a colossal failure. So many people involved, so many conference calls. I was doing this, I was doing that, I was doing the other thing, but I failed miserably. This cannot be our president. If she could not respond, if she could not get help in the hours that it took for this tragedy to unfold, she was so involved, she was so in charge, and that was the way that she chose to handle it and go about it, and that was the colossal failure that it resulted from her leadership. I would say this is the last person that we want to be our president. Well, maybe last after Bernie. I think Bernie might actually do more damage. Hillary would do less damage, less period, because I think she'd be so wound up and over herself. She would be just beside herself to be president. So I don't think we would have to worry about her doing quite that much damage. But this is a horrible thing. And if you watch the hearing today, and sorry for being such a Debbie Downer, but what we can do is say that we are very happy that there are people like Jim Jordan and Trey to bring this to our attention to make sure it gets out into the open. But I can tell you that there was one lady that was not happy to be there today, and her name was Hillary Clinton. And, I just hate it for her, but I think they're going to get to the bottom of this. And I'm not sure it's really going to be great for her. I don't necessarily believe, like some people, that she's going to be wearing orange or she's going to go to jail. But hey, it happened to John Mitchell. So, it can happen again. I think she'll make a bargain and maybe throw somebody under the bus before that happens. But I tell you what, I'll be here next week at 8 p.m. and it'll be a lot more fun because I think I'm going to have a guest that you guys are really going to love. But it's going to be a surprise. We're going to save it for next week. So enjoy this open and this close, Rick Robinson, because it might be the first and last time that you ever hear it. Thanks so much. This is Lou, and I'm signing out. I'll see you right here next week, 8 p.m. on the Bell Tolls. You guys have a great week.
When our water heater broke down last month, it was a nightmare. It took 5 hours for the plumber to show up, and he charged us a couple of $100 just to come out. Then it cost another $1,800 to put in the new water heater. By the time it was all said and done, I felt like I'd been taken. But what else could I do?
The smartest thing you can do is get a home warranty from American Residential Warranty. Their home warranties pay to repair or replace all your major appliances when they break, and they will break, and at the worst possible time. Call American Residential Warranty right now for free information on home warranties starting at just pennies a day. Don't wait for your refrigerator to stop running or your ceiling fans to stop turning. Call American Residential Warranty right now. Ask how you can save up to 50% on washer and dryer coverage. Just call 1-800-513-6154. That's 1-800-513-6154. Again, 1-800-513-6154. Call now.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.